Beamer as the... I did.
Because you said Bimmer, and Bimmer's not right.
Yeah, but I just did a drift going into the garage, and that's cool.
You
Beamer
got it
as
wrong.
the... I did.
Because you said Bimmer, and Bimmer's not right.
Yeah, but I just did a drift going into the garage, and that's cool.
Yeah, I'm taking with this new word that is wrong. It says like 20 times.
For the record, Bimmer is a BMW car. Beamer is a BMW motorcycle.
No. And you guys can go ahead and tell Ken that Jennifer is right. So...
One of these days, Alice, pow! Right in the kisser. We are going to be doing some of my favorite drifting, snow drifting. Drifting, pretty much everything happens in 1 second. So you have 1 second to do things. Like I said, I'm not trying to teach you how to drift. I'm just trying to explain how I learned it. And maybe that'll help you become a better driver or drifter. Or maybe just knowing what goes into a drift. You know, that'll help you. And if you are a drifter or you want to learn how to drift, you're like, I'm definitely going to learn and teach myself. Go to Skip Barber Racing School or go to a racing school and make sure they, you know, when you sign up, say, I want to learn how to drift. You want to make sure they're going to teach you. And this has happened to so many people I've talked to, that the driver instructor doesn't let you drift. Or you can drift better than the instructor. When I went to racing school, I could drift better than the teacher. And it was apparent to everyone in the class, and they said, we're not going to do it, we're just going to go around the turn a certain way. And when I went, I was so young, I didn't care that the first time I went around, I did the biggest drift ever. Full opposite lock, total slide. We were on a racetrack, so, I mean, we had plenty of room, and everyone was impressed with me, and I ended up co-teaching the class, but from my seat. And at the end of the class, people were coming up to me with their questions instead of the teacher. And the teacher, because they didn't know how to drift, they couldn't teach it correctly, and they were giving misinformation. How I learned to drift is I found an empty road and I turned my wheel all the way as I went around the turn, and I floored it. The back end kicked out. That was actually the turn. My first drift was on that turn. And it was that's how I learned. So I recommend finding an abandoned road where there's no curbs, no trees, where if you fly off the road, your bail area is just a grassy field. You have a light car, obviously front engine, rear wheel drive, or rear wheel drive, unmodified. Speaking about modifying, a lot of people put different wheels and tires on their car. If you put fat wheels on your car it's going to be harder to break that back end loose. On that 530i of mine, I put 16-inch rims on it. It came with 14-inch rims. It came with 6-inch wide tires. I put 7.5-inch rims on it, so bigger rubber. I put sport shocks on it, Bilstein sport shocks. And the sway bars got old, the bushings got old, so I had to replace the bushings. And my mechanic said, why don't you put, you know, some heavier duty sway bars on it? I know you probably don't even know what I'm talking about, but I ended up putting bigger sway bars on the car, and according to the research, everything would have fit. But with the bigger tires and the bigger sway bars, when I turned the wheel all the way, we would hear rubbing sound, and the inside of the wheel would rub against the larger sway bar. And consequently, the car did not drift as well, because at full opposite lock under the drift, whatever wheel, whichever way you were turning, that wheel would rub, and that causes a little bit of braking, and that can cause the car to spin around. So even though those are such minor modifications, when you add them all up, it ruined the integrity of the car.
And I've got a little bit of advice to give everybody. You know, like when you go to get on a roller coaster, you have to make sure that all your stuff is, you know, now they have where you can put it on a little table, but you have to make sure that your shoes are going to stay on and everything. It's very important that you don't like have loose items, because even yesterday, remember when we did that and the phone went flying across the car? Yeah. Just be careful.
If you've seen my video on possibility bags, I have possibility bags. Everything's in a bag in the trunk. It's all secure. In fact, we have some possibility bags. There's little holders here. Here's a possibility bag. I got it from, I think, American Airlines. It's got a zipper on it, so everything's in here. It's not going to get loose. Here's another little possibility bag, like GoPro items, whatever's in here, little phone chargers. So here we go, and I like to do a little test. So we're in the snow, so we're just going to hit the brakes, see how the car slides, and then always drift uphill. Don't drift downhill, because if you're going uphill, the car is going to naturally slow down.
Oh my goodness.
That was fun, wasn't it?
Oh my goodness.
That was fun, wasn't it?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's super slippery, which is awesome.
Oh my goodness. That is so exciting. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
So, and this is just testing, you know, we're feeling it out. You don't want to go into a drift, or you don't want to try this without, you know, sensing the road conditions. If it was raining, I would do a similar test. And also, by spinning your wheels a little bit, it gets the tread. It's just, I mean, we're talking on a microscopic level here, but the tread is a little bit smoother by spinning the tires, and you're going to get a little bit of a nicer slide. The way you drift, and this is why I moan and groan about all-wheel drive cars, is the secret to a drift is the front wheels are going at a completely different speed as the rear wheels. In fact, the rear wheels are going double or triple the speed usually than the front wheels. So if you have an all-wheel drive car, you're not going to have a difference in the wheels. You need a disparity. You need a difference. So all-wheel drive cars, they're never going to drift as long or as gratuitous, as I like to say, gratuitously as a two-wheel drive car. This is going to be like a sex episode, but when you drift a car, I think for the car, it's like you're giving it an orgasm, you know, or you're just taking it to its very limit, and then you're bringing it back again. And if you think about it, most people, I think, who buy a BMW don't drift it. So it's like those BMWs that don't get drifted, or those sports cars that don't get drifted. It's like they're, you know, if you don't use it, you lose it. So, you know, you want to give your car, show your car a good time. I was gonna drift it around here, but this guy's going so slow.
This is Suburban. Oh wow, oh wow, oh wow. Oh my goodness.
That was a little wag the tail.
Oh wow, oh wow, oh wow. Oh my goodness.
of a white Christmas.
Just like the ones I used to know. Kids are gonna think you're like so cool. Oh, Mr. Cool just came through. Mr. Suave kid.
You know, safety first. And that's another thing about drifting. I think it's better to do it when there's not so many people, because you can scare people and people get upset. Or if there are, I usually just get out and say, hey guys, I'm going to be doing some drifting. I'm a precision driver, you know, and that way they don't get scared. And really, I don't want them calling the cops. So that was a little drifting dialogue. What we just did there, that's wagging the tail. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't a full drift. You know, it was just like a little wagging the tail. And that's fun to do. I do that almost every time I drive my Z4. And this is a 428i convertible, in case you're wondering. Rear wheel drive. So when shopping for BMWs, this is what you guys want to look for. Is this little black dot here? What that is, that's a camera, and that's part of the Driver Assistance Plus package. And what's so cool about that, when you're parking, it gives you a aerial view of your car, which makes parking it a snap. And you know me, I love to put stickers on cars, so we put this. It's actually a BMW official sticker, and I got it and I stuck it on, and I think it just really makes the car look fabulous.
The red and black one. Oh, that's cool. Like, I thought that was how the car came. I didn't realize that you did that.
No, we did that. It really just sets the car off.
It does. It's like super cool.
When you do a full drift and the back end goes out and you have to turn the wheel all the way until it stops, that's called full opposite lock. And when you're at full opposite lock and you're sliding, that's a really nice drift. In order to straighten the car out, you back off the throttle and then you straighten out the wheel, and the car might actually swing the other way, and so you have to monitor that. Now, if you ever seen someone drift and their car just keeps fishtailing back and forth and then they fly off the road, what they did is they panicked and they did not back off the throttle. They kept the throttle and the back wheels kept spinning, because that's why I just sit in my driveway and spin the wheels. Because your tachometer goes crazy and you only have 1 second to do this. So if the first time you drift, that's the first time you've ever spun your wheels, it's just too much going on for your brain to to know what's going on. So it's a good idea to take it slow. I'll do a little drift here.
1 second.
See that? We just use the rear wheels to steer instead of using just, there's another one. And I could probably do a big donut in this driveway, but I won't do it because just in case I get it wrong, I'm gonna wreck into a house. You wreck a car and a house, that's just not worth it. So remember, you always want to protect your car, protect the people in the car. And I've never wrecked a car or even dented a car drifting, because usually when I drift, I'm looking for excuses why not to drift. Instead of like, hey, let's do it here, and never drift in a parking lot. There's usually big light poles, and around the base of the light poles they have a big chunk of cement. And if you drive into that, it is game over. on is you want to learn how to turn off your traction control in your car. And some cars you can turn it off, get in a snowy situation and floor it. Just kind of give you an idea. So I'm feathering out the throttle when I do that with the wheel spin. Actually, I'll just put this down. You guys can just listen at home. See, and I'm keeping an eye on the tack. Just practicing modulating that throttle and wheel spin. And actually, technically, I mean, I'm drifting right now. You know, and you want to be smooth and elegant. You don't want to be all jerky. And when you drift around a turn, you have to wheel spin, steering correction, vibrations, obstacles, unforeseen things. There's a lot.
What about tack and revs?
Tack and revs. Yeah, that's what we were
doing just then.
Yeah. So if you've never just spun your wheels, and all of a sudden your tachometer goes to the red line, if that happens for the first time in mid-drift, you're going to be like, what's going on? And then, so you have to be, it has to be like no big deal.
And so we were feathering out the throttle too then, weren't we?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's so fun.
Yeah, see, but it's...
We did a circle.
We did a circle and it's, whoa. It's,
and you know I love circles.
It's smooth. You know, and the other thing I do is drifting is I want to make sure my passenger is having a good time. They're not uncomfortable. They're not scared. It's really about car control. So you got to be smooth. You got to learn to feather out the throttle and be really smooth. All right, guys. So what we're doing is we're cruising around here, looking for drift spots. One of the reasons why I like this neighborhood is I don't know if you can see them, but there are no curbs here. It's really like a racetrack where there's a little, it's just like a little, it's like riding a curb at a racetrack. So for this drift, I'm going to go ahead and knock it down into second gear. And it's I mean, these are really snowy conditions. But it's a great way to practice your turn. I don't like to run through stop signs, but we're going to run this one a little. Put in a little throttle. There we go. Woo! You see that? Put a little throttle. There we go. Woo! You see that? And that's basically steering with your rear wheels. Now when we get into the road.
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness!
So we went a little far there, and so that's fine. And what you do when you slide out of control, we're drifting uphill, so it's real easy to slow the car down, and you just want to go ahead and apply the brakes gradually, fully.
So you don't want to just push down hard on the brake, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because the car is sliding, and I mean you can, but I like to do it gradually. That's just the way I am. It is so slippery out here. And I have to remember not to give it as much throttle. Hilarious. That was sloppy, but...
my heart is beating so fast.
Isn't it fun, though?
It is so fun. I feel like I'm at the amusement park riding a roller coaster. Like, I love roller coaster.
some people go to Six Flags or King's Dominion. I just get in my BMW and turn off the traction control. So my buddy Chip, who had the 912, this is his house up here, the big one. So you just turn the wheel, give it some throttle, and the back comes swinging around. There you go. And this car has run flat tires, so it's really terrible for drifting, but in the snow, it kind of doesn't matter.
And the crazy thing is that we've got the convertible top down, and it's snowing on us, and it's actually not that cold, so you might want to try that sometime.
We've got the little air things here, the air scarf.
Yeah, but still, I mean, you ought to try it. It's an adventure.
So you need to be able to do this. It's called palming the wheel, and you should be able to do it with either one of your hands. It is illegal because according to the driver's handbook, you're supposed to have both hands on the wheel at the same time. But sometimes
Like the 10 and 2?
10 and you should also be set up so your wrists are about here. Palming the wheel. Why do you need to know how to do this? Because sometimes the drift is so fast that you just do it with one hand and it's instinctual. Or it's happened to me where I'm going around a turn and I'm doing something and my car drifts, and very quickly I have to recover and I can just do it with one hand. When you put the car in reverse, if you're one of those people where you're like, you have to think about it like, which way do I turn the wheel? And do not try to drift, because you haven't developed your car senses enough. The other thing is, I would recommend getting a BMW. BMW has built a self-drifting car. A lot of people have self-driving cars. BMW has made a self-drifting car, and they work drifting into the DNA of pretty much all their rear-wheel drive cars. And the BMW M5 has been a Guinness Book World Record champion for, I think, 10 years of the world's longest drift. And you want skinny tires if you want to drift. So if you put big fat tires on your back, it's going to be harder to break that back end loose.
So what's the best BMW right now for us to drift on?
I would say the M2. The M2 BMW. Going back to science and drifting, you know, I think in elementary school or junior high or middle school, you learn something called the scientific process. How does that begin? You have a hypothesis, and then you do an experiment.
You did a lot of experiments.
Yeah, and then you observe, and then there's the conclusion. So if you want to learn to drift,
And you come up with a theory.
a theory. So just following the scientific process, if you want to learn to drift, I recommend always driving with the traction control off. Because if you drive with it on, you're not going to be aware all the time when it's working. Even me, you know, that light flickers for half a second. Sometimes it works, the light might not even come on. But if you drive with the traction control on all the time, you're completely unaware of when the car starts to slip. And then if you turn it off and try to drift, you're setting yourself up for disaster. So I keep it off all the time. I'm always spinning my wheels and observing it. And if I need to, I'll turn it on. But I'd rather know what the car is doing and be in full control. For me, drifting is actually a safety thing. I got my license on my 16th birthday.
So you just drift because you think you're a badass?
No, it's to me it's a safety thing. When I was studying for my driver's license test, I heard that it's very easy to get your license in America compared to some other countries. So I kind of said, well, what's the hardest country to get your driver's license in? And it happens to be, well, I don't know if it's the hardest, but one of the most difficult driving tests is if you're in Finland. It's very difficult to get the driving test. Let me, I'll just kind of pull over for a second to show you. So in Finland, if you're driving on an icy road, I'm using a rear-wheel drive Ferrari GTO here, limited edition.
Is that the one you were going to get?
I would get the Aperta version of this car. Aperta means that it has a removable top. So I want a Ferrari 599 Aperta or a Ferrari 458. I think my ultimate Ferrari would be a 1984 Ferrari GTO. In Finland, back to the subject, in Finland, to get your driver's test in a manual car, you have to be able to drive on an icy road and do a full 360 and keep going. So I just wanted to learn to do that. And one of the things, I would look at Skip Barber Racing School and see all the things that they would teach you. And one of the things they said is we teach you how to throw your car into a skid and then recover, which a skid is kind of a drift. I like to use the word drift because it doesn't imply any kind of braking. All the drifting I've done and will continue to do, I never use the brake. One of my first driving on the movie set was in Sex and the City. I gave Sarah Jessica Parker and Bridget Moynihan a ride in a taxi cab in New York City, and that's some precious cargo, guys. They don't trust everyone giving those to a ride in New York City. I did have my license then, though. So you have to learn to just spin your car fully control. So I just wanted to know how to do that. So that's one of the reasons I drift. The other reason I drift is I was driving once when I was 16. I had my license, and if anyone tried to race me, I would usually, try to race them on the street, traffic light to traffic light. And there was a guy at our high school who had an M3. He had the new M3, red, with custom rims on it, and we were both driving on this road, Bestgate Road, and we were turning onto General's Highway, and there's 2 lanes and they become 1 lane, and everyone in Annapolis just races there. You want to, there's a lot of cities where that happens, and you just kind of, it's a subtle race, sometimes it's blatant. And I was way ahead of him, so I had already crossed that point, but I was just watching my rearview mirror, and I was going to see how fast does he come around Bestgate. And I was basically had my foot on the accelerator. I was on the dead pedal with my left foot, and ready, like I'm ready to go. And he didn't come around the turn like this. I'll get the prop. He didn't come around the turn like this, but he came around the turn like this, full drift, and then started coming at me. And when you see a BMW M3 in your rearview mirror completely sideways and then straighten up and coming at you, I'll tell you what, I wasn't terrified, but I was frozen, and I was not, I was like, I'm not going to engage this guy, because that level of skill and aggression on a public road, and he drifted around a car and came at me.
Because it seems like you wouldn't want to drift while you're racing someone, because it seems like dragging your tires would make you slower.
Yes, it does. However, it's intimidation and it's style, and it tends to freak other people out. I mean, it freaked me out. It wasn't an all-out race, but he passes me, and he just kept going, because we had seen each other's cars, and we've oftentimes were parked in the same parking lot, and he had, it's a brand new M3. Today that M3 has gone up in value, those cars. The original M3 is a collector's item now, and he had that car, and he was just proving to me, like, don't even try it, I'm king of the road. And a lot of people in M cars, they do that, which is fine. That's not my style, though. So he just, he blows by me, overtakes some people on the shoulder, and then there's a traffic light, it's a red light, he blows through the red light. And I was just like, unbelievable. Wow. But
You didn't get caught. caught?
But when he passed
the
me,
red light?
no, he didn't get caught. Not that day. But I remember my right foot was just, it was poised on the accelerator. I could have at least raced him, but I was like kind of shaking because it was so. He affected me on a like physiological level because of that aggressive drift, and I wanted that power. So, you know, I continue to develop my drifting, and I have drifted on the race course as well as public roads. And it works. It freaks people out because they think if you don't know how to drift and someone drifts, you usually think, oh my God, they're on a whole nother level. That's a whole nother level. It's really about controlling the car and confidence behind the wheel. And so what I've learned about the BMW 5 Series, and I don't get paid for, BMW doesn't pay me a dime. I love BMWs. I've driven BMWs across the country probably 50 times. I started when I was 16 with that original 530i, and I just drove, not this 4 Series, but I have another 4 Series coupe. I just drove that across the country this year. DC to LA, 2.5 days. Nobody drives like Ken Bhan. And I just had shoulder surgery on this shoulder, so I had my arm in a sling. I drove one-armed.
So let's just back up and say what is drifting? It's power oversteer. It's where the back end swings out of the car, and you can actually steer the car with the back wheels, and you have to turn the front wheels in the direction of the skid in order to compensate.
Are you going to teach me how to drift?
Yeah.
I'm a little nervous.
This is kind of a bummer because we were out here. So we're going to go into some snow, and they took away all of our snow. That sucks.
So drifting homework, guys and girls watching. If you ever have to think about which way to turn the wheel when you're going in reverse, you failed. Do not try to drift.